Subject matter in this video may be sensitive to some viewers, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you want to send my way, please just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And thank you. This happened to me and my friend when we were 21. My dad was never in the picture, so it was always my mom and her man of the month. I never got along with them because they were always mean, abusive, or just used my mom to try to flirt with me, but she never believed that. Needless to say, my relationship with my mom definitely could have been better. I bring this up because as soon as I graduated high school, she sided with her boyfriend that I needed to get my own place, and stood in the doorway as I packed up as much stuff as I could and left. Thankfully, I have one of the best friends a girl could ask for, Jamie, and her mom agreed that I could stay there. Jamie was trying to figure out if she wanted to go to college, so her mom had no qualms about her living at home. I wasn't planning on going to college myself, but I already had a job and agreed to help pay the bills, or rent, while I was there. Jamie's mom, Carla, was the mom that I always wanted. She was kind, compassionate, and open with both of us, so my concerns and questions that I would normally ask my mom for help on, I went to her. I even had a pregnancy scare at one point, and they were the only two people that knew about it. I bring this up to help you understand a bit about my history and why I was always with Jamie. I know I wasn't the best kid growing up. I skipped school some days, I drank, talked back to my mother, and would, what the police would call, run away. But they never did anything about it. I already knew. I should have been better for myself, my own future, but I do still also blame my mother for this as well, because I never had a stable home that I could go to or trust, especially when there was a potential predator living under the same roof. With that being said, Jamie and I often partied with friends. We'd screw around at the mall or other retail stores, sometimes getting loud and we would be asked to leave, or would start getting heavily watched by AP or something. This incident happened to be one of those nights that we went a little too crazy. It was January 24th. I know this because it was my birthday and I was turning 21. I wanted to go out and get my own drinks and just party until I was sick. Jamie was cool with it, and after some convincing, Carla agreed to let us go as well, but told us to make sure we would call if we needed a ride or anything happened. We live in a large city, so we could walk just about everywhere, which was nice since I couldn't afford a car anyways. So we planned on hitting a few bars on this one block, and then just hanging around the area. We're both thinner girls, but I'd like to think that I could handle my own if something happened. I also carried a pocket knife concealed as a key on my keychain, so I had a little protection. We got to the first bar, ordered some specific fancy mixer, and got ID'd. Then they wished me a happy birthday. From there, we had a few drinks from people enjoying their nights as well. After a while, there was a large group of older women that came in and kept staring at us, so we decided to bounce. We went to another one that was a tiny half bar. It looked like it was one building but cut in half for the bar, and the other side was a small printing shop. There were a few older men sitting in a booth watching TV, and the bartender was playing one of those bar top video card games. We got a few drinks there, but if I as much as laughed too loud, they all looked over at me, so we didn't stay there for very long. We found another one and headed there, and this would be the one that we spent the rest of the night at. There were a few cars parked out front, but when we entered, they were pretty packed. Most of the tables were full and people were standing by the bar talking and dancing and having a good time. I knew that this would work for us too. We got in, got a few drinks, and just started screwing around. We tried playing darts and failed. We played pool and did an okay job, I thought, but there was one guy that kept trying to correct the moves that we were making. We didn't give a damn. We were already buzzed and were just impressed with being able to shoot the balls in the holes. There were a couple of guys sitting at a tall table right next to their little dance floor, so I dared Jamie to go and see if she could get us free drinks. After some negotiating, she finally gave in and we walked up to their table and asked if we could sit our drinks there while we danced. And they kind of looked at each other and grinned and said yes. We put some money on their little jukebox thing and started dancing. Thinking back on it, I'm sure we took it too far, but we were doing dumb dances, grinding on each other, things like that. After a few, one of the guys motioned us over and they bought us some drinks. We also started doing shots, stuff I'd never had before, and just started talking and legit having a great time. After a while, they went and started dancing with us, doing the same. Several drinks and songs later, more and more people started buying us drinks and we lost track of the original two guys we were sitting with, but that didn't stop us. Knowing me though, I started getting too rowdy. Some broad was getting mad about us laughing and screwing around and told the bartender we were underage and had fake IDs. I was pretty pissed, pretty much tossing my ID at them, telling them it was real and to check it, but they told us that we needed to leave. The fact that the bartender and the woman yelling at us were calling each other by their names tells me she was probably a regular, so of course they would just side with her. After a few more choice words, we gathered our stuff and started to leave. It was pretty cold that night, and with us being pretty intoxicated, we could hardly walk straight. We wanted to go to this local 24-hour taco place, and as we were talking and putting on our jackets, a guy walked out of the bar and asked us if we needed a ride. Jamie started to say no, and that she would just use the phone to call her mom, but I insisted on getting a ride and not bothering Carla, since it was so late. I vaguely remember this guy sitting at the bar smoking, so I figured he was cool enough. I got in the back seat. Jamie sat up front since she knew the taco place better than I did and could give directions. Like I said, I was pretty drunk. Jamie held herself a lot better than I could, and I am incredibly thankful for that to this day. She gave some direction as to where we were trying to go, and I made a dumb comment about the store across the street because it was dumb. As we buckled in, not expecting a long ride, we made some small talk with the guy when, in the middle of me talking, I noticed he didn't turn down the road that I thought was the road we needed to take. As I noticed this, Jamie seemed to as well. And as we both looked over to tell the guy, the look on his face had changed to a very serious one, and he was gripping the steering wheel hard, with both hands staring forward. He looked up at me in the mirror, and I just remembered feeling terrified at that moment. It was the same feeling I got when my mom's boyfriend assaulted me, but there was nothing I could do. And I've now put my best friend in the same situation. I started looking around the back seat to see if there was anything I could do or use, but there was nothing. The car was completely clean. All I could do was sit there in fear, watching as he drove by street after street and onto the highway. However, Jamie was the brave one in this case. She started talking to the guy and trying to get him to talk as well. She thanked him for the ride and said that she wished there were more people like him out there trying to protect younger girls. She said we were out for my 21st birthday and just trying to have a good time. She said something to me and all I could choke out was, yep. She said she was excited to start college and make her mom and little brother proud. She did have a little brother at the time. He was around 12. She asked if he went to school and he gave short answers, saying yes, what he went for, but then didn't talk much. She said what she was most excited about was being the first grandchild to go to college and to make her grandmother proud. Also true, but I could see what she was doing. She then asked him if he had someone that he was proud of or someone who was proud of him, and he didn't answer. We all just sat there quietly for a few when we finally heard him sniffle. He got off the highway, pulled up to a bus stop, and unlocked the doors. He told us to get out, and we both quietly but quickly jumped out of the car. He then said good luck in college and don't do anything you don't want to do, even if someone else says it's for your own good, and then took off. That's when I hugged Jamie tight, and she punched me in the arm and started crying. She told me as soon as she noticed he wasn't slowing down at the turn, she looked down at the floor trying to figure out what to do, when she saw 2 rolls of duct tape and an empty knife holder. So she went into the guilt trip, hoping it would work before we started pleading. I'm thankful she was clear-headed enough to do this because I was frozen in fear thinking that was it. We walked over to a gas station and called her mom to come get us. We didn't have any info on the guy past him having a green car and what he looked like. We told Carla about it, and she freaked out. We went and got prepaid phones that week. I'd like to think that I'm more careful now. I don't get into random people's cars. Hell, I won't even take Ubers because it gives me anxiety and I don't go anywhere without someone knowing where I'm at and my phone. So, to the guy that almost abducted us, thank you for changing your mind. I don't necessarily never want to meet you again, but I hope whatever demons were haunting you, I hope that they went away. And I hope you're doing better in life. When I was younger, I seemed to get sick a lot. If someone around me was ill, I would catch it. A lot of different foods also seemed to make me sick to the point that I would curl up in a ball and sleep. My parents would later have tests done to find out what could be wrong with me, but I bring this up to explain the situation further. My parents weren't neglecting me because it was a normal occurrence for me, and I would just wait for it to pass. Not to mention, I was old enough at this point to stay home by myself. One night in January, after dinner, I started to feel nauseous, so I took my medication and went to lay down on the couch. My little sister wanted to spend her Christmas and birthday money. Her birthday is December 30th, but she couldn't wait any longer. I told my parents they could take her and that I would stay home and sleep. I wanted to be left alone anyways, so I didn't have a problem with it either. They finally agreed after convincing them I would be fine, and reminded my mom of the returns that she needed to make as well. They left around 5 or 6. It wasn't quite dark yet, so they said they would call when they were close to home, so I could turn on the porch light. Now, with them gone, I laid on the couch turning the TV on, something to fall asleep to, and slowly drifted off. It had been an hour or so when I was startled awake by something on the TV. I grabbed the remote to turn it down, and as I readjusted on the couch, I looked over to the large window in the living room and noticed it was dark. Then, I noticed that there seemed to be a figure in the window as well. I wear glasses, and I didn't have them on at the time, so I just thought I wasn't seeing something right. So I just stared at the figure for the longest time, trying to focus and get my brain to figure out what I was looking at. After a few moments, I leaned over to the table to put on my glasses, and that's when I started to realize that it was definitely a person staring back at me. I could see the outline of a hood, their shoulders, and their arms. Then I started thinking, what the hell do I do? This person is staring back at me and they know what I look like. Will they try to rush in at me if I try something? I slowly started to lay back down on the couch, like I didn't notice them, and grab my phone with my eyes closed. I guess I thought I was being sneaky and making it look like I wasn't going to call 911, but that was when the window was smashed in. I just remember screaming and running to my parents' bedroom, which was in the far back side of the house. I wanted to get as far away as possible, and since it was on the bottom floor, it had a window that I could possibly go through. I ran back there, immediately locked the door, and called 911. My parents' room had a big walk-in closet, and the operator told me to hide in there until I heard the police show up. I was scared, and I had a million things going through my mind. You always think you know what you would do in these situations until they happen, and then you hope that the operator can save you and tell you everything you need to do to survive. I also wanted to call my parents, and the operator was actually awesome enough to have someone call them somehow, which was also a relief. Like I said, it was already dark, so it had been a few hours, and I expected that they would be home soon. It felt like forever, but after checking the call records, it had only been about 7 minutes, I think, before I heard the cops calling out, and I hung up and came out with them. When I walked out, one met me at my parents' door, and there were two more in the living room. It was freezing in there with the window, of course, but my attention was averted when the officer showed me this rock with what looked like paper and tape on it. I asked them if it was a note, and they said yes, and asked if there was anyone they could think of that would want to hurt me or my family. And I had no clue. My mom was a nurse, and my dad did construction. Not like they could really have enemies, and then my sister and I were still in school. Last I checked, we didn't have people that hated us to this level. Thankfully, my parents showed up soon after, and I didn't want to let go of my dad. They asked them the same thing, and then showed us the note. It said something like, "Next time it won't be your window, it's time to pay up." The cop asked us if we knew someone that would do this again, or if any of us owed someone, and we all said no. My dad had to get the window boarded up, and our neighbor came over and helped. Because of this happening, and not being able to get the window fixed that week, my dad went and bought some security cameras, and had one pointed at the door and window, both back and front doors, and the driveway. He also wouldn't let me stay home by myself anymore. I felt safer with the cameras because we got alerted when someone approached the areas, but I didn't like staying home at night by myself anyways. Now, it had been 2 weeks or so since this had happened, and the window has since been fixed. It was one evening. I had gone to my room to just chill when I got an alert on the camera. Most of the time I ignored them, unless it was the one at the front door, and this one happened to be. So I tapped on it, and there was a guy that walked up to the door, put something under the rug, and took off. I was about to go to check on it when I started hearing my parents shouting. I went to the living room and saw my mom standing at the door, on the phone, and my dad is down the driveway. I finally learned what all happened when my mom showed me the envelope. It had a letter in it that said, "Sorry about the window," with a $100 bill in it. My dad had seen the alert as well, and tried to chase the guy, but he got away. They called the cops to report it and showed them the video where the guy wasn't even trying to hide his face. It wasn't long after that they found and caught the guy. Apparently he'd felt bad and decided to try and pay for the window. I recently learned from my parents that the guy that broke our window knew our neighbor and was probably trying to break hers, but that's just old people gossip that I haven't been able to confirm. Either way, it was a terrifying situation for my teenage self. And now, I don't like sleeping in the living room unless the curtains are completely closed. And if it's going to be dark soon, I recommend you turn on the porch lights, and you should always make sure that your doors are locked. My parents own property in a very rural area in Minnesota. I loved going up there in early January for our late Christmas and staying for the week. They have a little guest cabin that I typically stayed in, so I have my privacy, but it's only ever me and my dog. Not that I minded though, because it feels like I have my own place. I live in Texas with 2 roommates that I could do without, so it's nice to have some quiet. I'm from Minnesota, but I moved to Texas for school and was planning to move back once I graduated. I hate your highways, Texas. Anyways, the snowfall at my parents' property was almost therapeutic. During the day, it was always dead silent, like the snow just buried anything that made a sound, and at night, it was only ever lit up by the moon. Otherwise, it was pitch black. Like, you can't even see your hands in front of your face. I always enjoyed walking around back in the trees because it reminded me of my childhood. I would go back there and have a whole imaginary fortress, friends, enemies, and creatures to fight off. So walking back there as an adult brought back memories, and I always seemed to find something that I left, hid, or lost. I got there the first week of January since we were on holiday break. I went in and talked with my parents, had some coffee. I swear they drank coffee all day long. Mom knew that I would be there around dinner, so she already started making my favorite casserole. After eating, I went to the cabin to get ready for bed. The next morning, I got up around 8 to my dog, DJ, needing to go out. I was still groggy, so I just threw on my boots, still in my pajamas, and opened the door. Being such a large area, I wasn't worried about him running off or anything. He's a St. Bernard, gifted to me by my parents, and was about 4 at the time, so he always had a lot of energy. I should have known better, because of the about 3 minutes I stood there, he was instead playing in the snow. I got him back inside and decided to get dressed and walk around for a few before bothering my parents. As I mentioned, DJ was very well trained, so if I told him to come back, stay put, follow me, he would listen. And he could also tell when I was upset and would comfort me or protect me. As I mentioned earlier, since I got DJ from my parents, this wasn't the first time he'd been back in those trees either. So, we started walking back there, jumped over a small ditch and through the trees. As expected, it was completely silent. There was a slight hum from the wind blowing, the taps of tree branches hitting each other or bending, and the crunch of snow beneath our feet. I was just walking and trying to identify the different trees when I noticed I didn't hear DJ walking with me. I stopped and looked around and realized that he had stopped walking a few feet back. I called for him, and he just stood there, looking at me. After a few more times, he finally came, but he walked slowly to me. I was thinking maybe he was ready to go back, but it was unlike him to tire out so quickly. So, I decided to keep going a bit, and if he stopped again, we would head back and maybe go out there again tomorrow. Not much further, though. He stopped again, and I noticed because he started whimpering. I looked back again and said, "What's wrong, DJ?" That's when I noticed he kept turning his head sideways, like he was listening for something. So I got quiet and listened as well. After a few seconds of not hearing anything, I tried to get him to keep going when he started growling, and then I heard something that sounded like a tree breaking or snapping. It was possibly just a tree breaking under the weight of the snow, but DJ's reaction had me on edge that it may have been a wild animal, so I decided to head back. I didn't want to disturb it, and I definitely didn't want either one of us hurt. I turned around and started walking back and called for DJ, but he didn't move. He continued to just stare straight ahead, growling. I finally raised my voice and said, "DJ, let's go, now." Then, I heard my voice, clear as though I repeated myself saying, "DJ, let's go." It wasn't like an echo. It was like I just listened to my voice being recorded and then replayed. I had no idea what I was hearing at that point, and it freaked me out, so I knew there was no playing around. I tugged DJ by his collar and yelled for him to go again, and he finally took off with me. I was walking quickly with DJ right beside me when I then heard a blood-curdling scream. It made me jump and cover my ears. There were no houses nearby, so at this point, I'm hauling ass out of there. Thankfully, DJ followed running ahead of me and then just stopped, turning around and barking. I looked back to see nothing there, but suddenly felt like someone pushed me down from my back. I landed in the snow, and DJ was nearly on top of me with his fur raised, growling and barking so much. There was drool flying everywhere. I just sat there dumbfounded, trying to figure out what had just happened. I looked around and I didn't see anything that I could have tripped on, and I saw no one or nothing nearby that could have pushed me either. I had to try and calm DJ down, and finally snapped him back. I've never seen him like this, but at least I knew he was good at protecting. My roommates always screwed around like they were punching me, and he would bark at them, but nothing like this. I got up. My legs were a bit shaky, but at this point I was out of the trees. The cabin was close by, so I walked over to it, looked around one more time, and then DJ and I rushed inside, locking the door. I stayed there, sitting on the couch with my dog for quite some time until we passed out. For being 4, he was huge and could keep you warm, so it wasn't hard to fall back asleep on him. Not to mention all the energy we had just expelled. I woke up to a knock on the door, which was my dad. I didn't know what to tell him about what had happened at the time because I had no real idea of how to explain it. Everything I could think of just made me sound crazy. Later that night, after dinner, my dad asked if I went out into the trees yet because he knew I liked going back there. I must have had a look on my face because he asked me what was wrong. I just told them that I think I may have disturbed something back there, and it got DJ worked up, so I just went back to the cabin. They just suggested what it could have been and then left it at that. I didn't mention anything else about it to them, but the next day, I walked over to where I entered the trees and noticed that there was one set of footsteps and also DJ's tracks, but there was also a drag mark serpentining behind me. I wasn't carrying anything that would have caused it, nor was it from my dog because I could see his tracks with mine. I could tell DJ was on alert though, so we just went back. I hung out at my parents' place most of the day and then headed home from there. I've still never mentioned it to my parents, but I told a close friend of mine who thought it could be some kind of being that could mimic voices, but I'm still not sure if I believe in all that. What else could have copied my voice so perfectly? Since then, I try not to think about it, but when I go back up there, it's immediately on my mind, and I always wonder if DJ remembers it too. So these were stories taking place in the month of January, with a video being released within the month of January. And currently, it is January. Yep. Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed these stories. I know I did. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you're new to the channel. A huge shout out and thank you to everybody who sends me their stories or lets me use their stories. Always appreciated. And if you really liked this video and these stories, consider hitting that join button or going to my Patreon page, where for as little as $1 a month, you can help support the channel to help me continue doing this and get early access to my content. Which, we all win in that situation, right? I get to keep doing it, you get to hear what happens before it happens, that kind of stuff. And then, finally, consider leaving me a comment down below. What are your thoughts on the month of January? Is it your favorite month? Is it your least favorite month? Is it your 7th favorite month? Or is it just a month that you're indifferent about because it exists at the beginning of the year? Just tell me what you think. Yeah. Anyways, I hope you all have a great day, and I hope I'll see you in the next video. But until then, my beautiful friends, sleep well.